Okay, kia ora koutou. Welcome along, everybody, to our Q&A this month for March 2025. Our topic today is a big one: writing for impact. All of you will have some kind of leader that you need to write to, whatever kind of organization you are in. And today's Q&A is about helping you to write to those leaders more effectively, because we all want to get results. We all want to be listened to, and we all don't want to break ourselves with stress every time we do that. So our wonderful consultants today will be giving you practical tips on how to make your life easier when you're writing to a manager, a leader, no matter how big their wig might be. I'll get them to introduce themselves in a second, but just a quick promo. This Q&A is brought to you by Write Online, which is our micro learning library of amazing videos, both of which feature our consultants in targeted doses today for all sorts of different things that you might want to learn about communicating and writing at your best. So you can go to Write Online, that's write as in writing, .co.nz, and you can get a 7-day free trial if you're interested in just seeing if that's for you. Okay, well, let's hear from our consultants. First of all, we'll just hear a very quick introduction so you know a little bit about them, and then we will get into the Q&A itself. Okay, our first consultant, Daniel Androutsos. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Daniel.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Daniel. Plan Language Consultant here at Write. I've been working here about 2.5 years, running workshops of all kinds. I've been running policy-oriented workshops for government agencies for about 2 years. So I've trained a lot of people who write to decision makers, more than I can count, actually. Looking forward to seeing what gems we can share today.
Fantastic.
I also consider myself to some extent to be Simon's apprentice, so I'm planning to give him all the hard questions.
We're all going to be lifelong lovers of learning. Kia ora, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. And Simon Carter, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you, Daniel. So I'm Simon Carter. I'm a consultant here at Write. I've been here for about 7 years, and I've worked with all sorts of organisations, very often writing for decisions, helping people find better ways to write to help decision makers take good decisions. So things like board reports, all kinds of reports and summaries. And I've also done a lot of work in my before I joined Write on everything from helping people write bids and proposals through to helping people write business analysis reports and so forth.
Brilliant. Okay, well, between these two lovely lads, we'll be able to answer your questions. Now, just a reminder, we are live today. If you are watching, this is happening right now. And if you are watching, you get the unique privilege of being able to submit your own questions. So these two folks will be able to answer if you have a specific question about your particular organization. Maybe you've got a sticky situation that you want some guidance on. Maybe you've got a recurring issue that you want some tips on how to solve. We can help you. So please, down the bottom of your Zoom bar there, you'll see the Q&A function. Don't put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, and we can get through as many questions as we possibly can today. So I encourage you to join in, and let's first of all get into it. Now, the first question, and the question that I ask in every Q&A, is what are your top 3 tips on this topic? So Simon, I'm going to go to you first. And this is just going to be a quick kind of, top 3, the things that are going to make the biggest difference for anyone who is writing to any kind of leader. Simon, what would you say first of all?
Well, my top 3 are, first of all, start with a summary. And your summary can be very brief. And the key thing you want to get across in that summary is what's the thing that you want your reader, your decision maker to agree to buy into. So what's that main message, and what are your top 3 to 5 reasons why? And so those might be to do with avoiding a risk or getting a benefit, whatever it is, the thing that you want, why it makes sense. Get that in really early. It's my first thought. The second is write in a way that's straightforward, clear, and easy to read quickly. one of the biggest things I see when I meet folks is they feel that because they're writing to a decision maker, they've got to make the tone really formal. They've got to grab that tone knob and turn it all the way from everyday up to ready to be chiseled in stone. So uh, when you do that, you make yourself harder to understand, and people literally can't follow you. Write it as near as you can to how you would say it. And the third thought is think through what are your decision makers' likely questions and make sure you answer them. So I tell people a really quick story. I hope you'll indulge me. I used to work as a graphic designer, had been up all night putting together a creative pitch, went to the pitch meeting, terribly excited that they seemed to like the design. The first question they had is, how long will it take? And I completely hadn't thought about it because I was so focused on making it look beautiful. But it was a horribly obvious question I should have had an answer to.
Fantastic.
And that's it. Those are my top three.
Thank you very much, Simon. Well, if you've just joined us, that's a lot of bang for your buck already. So thank you very much, Simon, for those top 3 tips. Daniel, your top 3 tips, what would you say?
Yeah, I might be cheeky and just do one really good one, but it'll kind of complement what Simon said. So, yes, I mean, especially when we're talking about, writing policy, writing to public service decision makers, so much rewriting gets done. So much, time and time again. I don't know how many levels of check you have to go through out there, but one thing we really suggest is, sometimes you might get a really thorough commissioning, and if you don't, you should definitely be asking a lot of annoying questions at that point to the person who's commissioning this, who seems to not know what they want. Make them do their job. They should actually think about what they actually want before they try to get you to do it. And then once you've kind of got your key blocks of, what the outcome is that you're looking for, key messages you need to get across, so that's likely to happen, and you've thought of those key questions that the reader's probably going to want to get answered when they're reading what you've sent them, put that together in some kind of outline, like a skeleton of the document with all those bits in place and the purpose nice and clear at the start. Put in bullet points for things that you'll have to include and expand on, any points of evidence that you're going to have to provide. And then take that back to the person who's commissioned you and say, look, this is where I'm heading. Is this still what you want? Or have you had some other revelations now? Well, has something changed? So you get feedback before you've gone through the process of producing the whole draft and then having that happen. I mean, that's still going to happen eventually to the other drafts you write, but you can at least cut down how much of it's happening by getting that check done early. And if you've got a good relationship with your manager, you might be even able to get them to have that outline conversation with the person above them who's going to be getting the draft, so that you get more feedback in at the earlier stage and then less time wasted later on.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think that's 3 in 1, we'll call that. I think the benefit of that one as well is that sometimes decision makers, if they're pressed for time and you give them a lot of writing, will tend to focus on easy wins like grammar errors or punctuation. Whereas if you give them less writing that's more focused on ideas, you can get that early buy-in from them. Okay, folks, well, that is a lovely opening. Thank you both. If that has made you think of a certain situation from your particular workplace or organization, maybe you're working on a document to a leader right now and you want a little bit of guidance, you can submit a question, pop it in the Q&A down the bottom there, and Simon and Daniel will be able to give you some lovely tips that you'll find very tasty for when you get to the writing process. Okay, now a question we commonly get quite regularly when it comes to writing to leadership is about getting the balance right between the context and the actions. So obviously you want them to do things, but you also want them to be aware of certain information that's going to affect that action. Sometimes people will make the mistake of just front loading with oodles and oodles of context before they even get to the actions. And sometimes people will lead with actions that, for political reasons, may need a little more information. Do either of you have some thoughts on what people might use to guide them in that situation? Simon, what would you say, just as a general rule there? How do we balance context and actions?
I think there are two quick thoughts. The first one is you will need to set some context in your summary, but keep it as brief as you can, and tell the reader where you've explained some of the extra depth of the context. So the absolute minimum that people need to get a grip on it, but make sure you give them more detail later. So I think the biggest thing is resist the temptation to put in what we would call too much middle, because really you want to say, this is the thing I want, this is the context, this is why. That's your summary. If you put in a load of middle, it's like a dreadful sandwich. Imagine, a sandwich that's got fairly tasty bread, but then the middle is some sort of really tasteless, fluffy. Imagine that dreadful sort of synthetic marshmallow, and then right in the middle you've got one little thin layer of cheese. You want keep it tight and crunchy, as in sandwiches, as in summaries, I would say.
Okay, lovely. And I guess some of that, once you've got the actions really clear, after that you can go to town with further context from there. Okay, Daniel, any thoughts on that one about balancing context and actions there when we're writing to leaders?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of context that you'll need to provide is going to depend on how familiar the reader is with the situation, or how recently they've been already dealing with it. So sometimes you might need to add more context than others, but I think you really don't want it to get in the way of the need to knows. And so much, we talk about writing for your reader, and so much of it is getting as much clarity as you can before you start on those things. Like, how much does the reader know? What is their attitude? Like, are we going to have to try hard to convince them that this is actually a good idea? In which case we may need to make several points of evidence really clear. Or are they kind of already on board? How much trust do you have? The cases where there's more trust between, say, a ministry and the minister that's established over time, that's where the briefings will be getting shorter, because the ministers learn that they can rely on what's being provided, that these people have backed this up with facts and stuff, and I don't have to worry about that, but that takes time to develop, so something you can work towards. But yeah, I agree with everything Simon said. You don't want the context getting in the way.
Right. Okay, lovely. Thanks, folks. Okay, cool. Remember, you can submit your questions down in the Q&A function. Okay, let's shift to a little bit more of a government focus. Daniel, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this one. Here's one. I know our minister is out of step with what the ministry thinks about most issues. I hope this is not too familiar for people. Should we disregard their point of view and just tell them in briefings and memos what we know they need to hear? The terms free and frank come up here. A little bit of guidance, Daniel, on that?
Yeah, it's I mean, I have a lot of empathy in those kind of situations. The bottom line is that if you're working in government, if you're a minister, you are a minister, but you are also a politician, and so and the job of the ministry is to provide free and frank advice that's very sound, and that nothing is being withheld, and what you're providing is testable and reliable as possible. And to be thinking long term as well. It's kind of enshrined in what it should be when we're talking about free and frank advice. But it's always going to be, on some level, the prerogative of the minister to consider, okay, well, how is this going to affect me personally? I mean, and professionally, is this going to possibly lead to me losing my post because of the reaction I'm going to receive? And that's why occasionally those decisions that seem like they're best thing for the long term don't get picked up. And that's part of the reality of what we're doing, but in any case, your responsibility is still to provide that constructive advice. But in any relationship, there's always a better or worse way to give bad news, so you need to be thoughtful about that, and what is the most palatable way we can present this information to the minister that we know that they aren't going to be enthused by, so they at least acknowledge that this is something that should be considered. So it really depends on the situation.
Okay. Any thoughts on that one, Simon? And maybe we can even broaden this concept to if we're writing to a leader with something that we know is going to be unpopular.
It's a tricky one. I think Daniel's made some excellent points there, which is around how do you kind of have to work with the sort of personality and character that you know of that decision maker. I think one of the things that I've observed clients doing that's worked really well, where they'll, if they know that someone on their side of the fence, on the client side, isn't kind of aligned with the decision that the rest of the group thinks is sensible, they'll try and make sure that they find someone who the kind of outlier trusts and respects, and try and work through that person to try and so it's all a bit West Wing, really. It's kind of, but working through personal relationships can often be a very good way to do it. Or I've also seen it work where you try and find ways to make sure that our outlier can see what other folks think, because they may not be aware of it. So can you organize a workshop or a conversation or a briefing document that's been authored elsewhere and make sure that they see it and discuss it, something like that. So you don't have to be the channel of kind of bad news, as it were.
Lovely. Great. Very good advice. Thanks, folks. Okay. Let's keep on this same topic. We've got a question here. Any specific advice for NGO, so non-government organization advocates writing to governments? So I guess there's kind of two different rules there in the private and the public sector. Simon, can we just stay with you? Would you say, is there anything special outside of what we've just talked about that you would need to be sensitive of if you're a non-government organization writing to a government organization?
Well, I think my instinct would be that the issue here is that whenever you're trying to work with any decision maker, you need to try and understand what's driving their decisions. So what are the key influences for them? And if you can present your case in a way that it aligns with the things that are their priorities, then you've got a much better chance of getting there. And so I guess then the challenge becomes how can you be confident that you do understand what their drivers are? So sometimes that may be easier. Sometimes it may be, again, trying to just have conversations to understand what are their priorities. How can you work with them? But yeah, I think it's about it's that aligning piece.
Yep. Cool. And any thoughts on that one, Daniel?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. You can kind of do a bit of work speaking to other people who have dealt with the person you're writing to or the organization, and find out what are the things that are their priorities at the moment. It seems like, especially last year, so many government departments' priority was saving or the bottom line. So you'd be doing whatever you could to show what the impact will be on that of the work you're doing, and even if the nature of the work isn't really about that, we need to see some kind of impact, I think, related to that can suggest that this is also of value, or at least it's not going to cost you to do this thing. It's going to, massively reduce reoffending, let's say. Yep. It's worth taking a go because you've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain, let's say,
Cool.
I had one other quick thought on that, if we have time, Thomas.
Yeah,
which is it's a phrase that I was reminded of. I might just share my screen for a second. Am I able to do that easily?
You should be able to. Yep.
So this is a very old sort of advertising. So I'm getting a message sharing isn't turned on. I don't know if Thomas, that's something within your remit. But I'll just. There's an old advertising phrase which is "sell the sizzle, not the sausage." So the idea is that and the idea of this is that if you're trying to get someone to buy a sausage or a project or sign up for a project, try not to. Often our instinct is we focus on the attributes of the project or the product. It's 100% this, it's made in this way. Actually, what the hunter cares about, or the decision maker, is what's the experience like of eating that sausage.
You can share now, Simon.
Great, thank you. So yeah, it's not terribly exciting, but the screen I have, but let's have a quick look if I can make that happen. So yeah, sell the sizzle, not the sausage. So where the sizzle is the benefit. So what's the upside for the decision maker? Uh, and that comes back to that alignment piece. And because often as experts, our instinct is to talk a lot about the sausage. But actually, it's the sizzle that everyone finds delicious or attractive, or that's the bit they remember. So there you go, a little bit of so from the heartless world of advertising, I think that can actually be a useful thought when it comes to persuading decision making.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you,
Makers,
Simon.
rather.
Bit of a food theme going on here. Sandwiches, sausages. Who would have thought? We're trying to feed these leaders good stuff, and I think it just comes with the territory. Okay, we have another.
I saw what you did there, Thomas. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it just is. Okay, here's another question, and this is kind of a response to our advice earlier about giving an early draft or some key points rather than a full document. So the question is, any tips on maintaining credibility as a policy writer while asking for feedback from managers or technical subject matter experts? I guess there's the implication there that if you go to them and you need a lot of extra advice to get your thinking straight, what will they think of you? Is there a particular angle you can take when you are requesting early buy-in for some ideas or main points? Simon, any thoughts on that one?
Well, I think the challenge here is it's often kind of personality driven and relationship driven. But I think excuse me, my first thought would be try and position it as a benefit for the decision maker. If I can have 15 minutes with you on the outline, it means it will get you a draft that delivers what you want, and it won't waste your time, and it won't waste your team's time with edits and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
Right.
the way you sell it or present it may be different according to personality and the drivers of that decision maker.
Mm. And sometimes signaling the process ahead can be helpful as well. As in, I know that you're going to need to sign off on this down the track. I want to give you as much say as possible before we get to that point. Daniel, any thoughts on that one?
That's it. Sometimes this appears like you're inserting a new process into a lengthy process, but really emphasizing the value of it and what it's going to result in is you're going to spend less time going over the stuff I send you. Yep. By having this conversation earlier, and you're going to more quickly get the thing that you're trying to get a decision maker to decide on. So, yeah, that's the thing. Refocus the benefits.
Right. I believe saving time is quite a sizzle. Now, thank you, Trish. Trish Saulele says, "Good food for thought." Lol. Thank you, Trish. Okay, let's move on to board reports. So those of you who work in organizations that are governed by a board, you will be familiar with the nature of that audience. Here's a question. Our board often just read the reports in the meeting, I've found out. Any tips on how to write so that someone can read the main bits of information quickly, even though I'd prefer that they read the whole thing? Daniel, what can we do there? That someone is picking up this report for the very first time in the context they're going to need to respond. How can we make that leader's life easy?
Yeah, I mean, like I was working with another organization, and previous sets of board papers were 300-400 pages, and the chance of one of the board members sitting through all of that before the meeting was pretty low. So a lot of it is about prioritizing the content. One option is actually to, if there's background information that you want them to absorb separate from the key pieces of the puzzle for making decisions, then, maybe that's something you provide like a month in advance. Like, here is the background to the issues that we're going to be getting you to decide on, so that if they've got time, if they're invested, they can get in early on that stuff. You don't overwhelm them with several hundred pages. But also, you want to make your documents as skimmable as possible so that those readers can pick up as much detail as they can the first time they pick it up. So a lot of it is about trying to get the purpose or the main message that you need to get across into the title, into the first couple of sentences. And this is where your planning really comes through if you do it right. Like, if you plan the document around the key messages that you need the decision makers to pick up, or the key things they need to consider to make a good decision, and a lot of the time those are going to be the answers to the key questions they're going to have, and you build the document around that so that those headings kind of jump off the page with those messages, then they're going to pick that up real quick, and they're going to identify pretty quickly where they need to read more, where they have more questions, where they want more detail, and you're going to waste a lot less of the time, and they'll end up thanking you, or they might not thank you. I think it's a thing with writing. It's like proofreading, right? Really good proofreading, nobody notices it. They notice when it's bad. So if you do a great job of this, then things will run smoothly, and people may notice the contrast. Like, ooh, I feel this is much smoother than before.
Well, I guess ultimately the win is for you if they are able to read your main messages and discuss in the meeting that they are there the things that you need them to discuss. That's a win for you. So it's kind of mutually beneficial. Simon, anything to add on this one? The people are sitting in the board meeting. They're picking up your document for the first time. How do we make that either leap off the page, or how do we make their lives easier?
I think you know what I'm going to say, Thomas and Daniel. It's the magic of threes, isn't it? It's the I think the first thing I would say is work on the assumption that they're going to read it in the board meeting and they haven't read it beforehand. It's just a horrible sort of fact of life. So if Thomas and Daniel will indulge me, I've quickly got a couple of slides on this because I think there's a really sort of useful thought here. So I just need to do the sharing thing. Hold on, caller. Give me one moment. I have one here I prepared earlier. Always assuming that.
That's cool. We will, folks, we've got time for about one question more or so after this. So once Simon's shared the slides and thoughts, we'll move into our last question.
Can you hear my slide? Can you see them, the slide? Yep, cool. So this is a model that we use a lot. One of the models we use based on the work of a woman called Barbara Minto. We call it the Minto model, based on ideas in her book, The Pyramid Principle. So there's the book, published by Financial Times Prentice Hall, still in print, about $90. If you Google it, you'll find various sort of free explanations on YouTube and TikTok of varying quality. You can also download a document from our website called The Magic of Threes. So at the heart of the book is this idea that if you want to persuade people, you need to make your case, summarize your case very early, your logical arguments. So the way Barbara recommends you do this is you have your main point very early, but you answer the reader's why questions. So why is this sensible? Is it reasonable? And so the main point in the supporting arguments, we get those in very early, and then we'll move to the data or the logic that backs it up. So this is the kind of logic model, if you like. This is how it might apply to a situation. So I hope you can read that. That's old folk like me find this massively hilarious because this is a plot point from the first true Star Wars movie. And you can see we've got our main message and action, the reasons why, and then we have the data behind it. So that's our logical analysis. But the power of this model is that this is how you can then start to write that up. So this might be the very, very beginning of your board report. I know that board reports are heavily templated and you have to work within them, but one way or another, you want to try and get this in early. And then once they've got that bit, that's your upfront bit, you can then expand on that by putting a bit more detail behind each of those key reasons why. We talk about the magic of threes and having 3 key points. If you have 4 or 5, it's not the end of the world, but you want to try and keep your top level argument tight and crunchy. Back to food again. Crisp and crunchy, I should say.
Like potato chips. Sausages and potato chips.
Yeah, not sure about that. Not sure about potato chips.
Oh, I'm sure about that.
Not sure about the full nutritional value there, but yeah, I buy the idea, absolutely. Who wants a soggy potato chip, indeed?
No, you just got to leave the sauce till later.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Simon. And pictures say 1,000 words. Now we're going to finish on a question about the writing itself. So we've talked about a few different things. Simon, one of your top tips was you talked about the dial people feel they need to turn up the formality, and you talked more about writing as they should speak. Daniel, I'm just going to go to you first of all. What are some tips that you can give to people about writing plainly? Like what kind of language should we be using to write to decision makers? And does it need to be any different to if we're writing to any other person?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, no. So one really nice thing, I mean, we're always telling people that, everything you're writing, especially in the work context, should sound okay when you read it out loud. Like if you imagine the reader standing in front of you and you read out loud what you've written, it would sound okay to say it. And if it sounds weird or clunky, you should do something about it, because it'll sound weird and clunky even in their minds when they're reading silently. And so making sure that it's passing that test means that you're going to be using yourself in the writing. You'll put the I in the we, or whoever we is, and we might to confirm who that is. You'll be putting the you in the writing, because for example, the minister will probably realize that they are the you when they're reading it. So in that way, it starts to sound like, I mean, there's variation, right? Like if you're giving a presentation to a board, you're going to speak more formally than you will if you're having a quick chat with a friend, So there's still levels, but if you go too far above that, then it's going to switch off. So shorter sentences, if you're reading it out and you're having to take breaths and it's not over yet, it's like it's too long. And you catch like those weird clunky phrases that just you wouldn't say, and some of it's just about trying to use the verbs or the actions more, because that's what we do when we're speaking.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Simon, any notes on the actual words and language that we use when we're writing to leaders?
Yeah. So I think the two quick thoughts really is try and resist getting drawn into business speak. So there's a great quote that Mark Twain once gave advice to a younger writer on how to sell more of his newspaper columns. And he said, don't use a $40 word when a 50-cent word will do. So for example, do you have to say procure? Could you say buy? Or source? Can you say start rather than commencement? Things like that. And another tip I'd give is there an everyday phrase you might insert? So a bit of kind of everyday language. So you don't want to overdo it, but if you have one or two everyday phrases you put in, so for example, approaching the project in this way will guarantee we get the most bang per buck. Or we put together a team who are very experienced. It's not their first rodeo. So that if you just do once or twice a phrase like that, it can just make your writing pop a bit and be a bit more memorable. And it's still, I think, acceptable within the business world. As long as you don't, push the envelope too far, you'll be fine.
And as long as we don't use something that is out of common usage, or
Indeed.
Yes, no, pick your moments there. Lovely. Okay, folks. Well, I'm going to pass very shortly to each of our consultants to have their final word. This could be just a summary of something important that you've said through the webinar, or a bit of encouragement for those folks who are watching. If you are watching, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to you folks who have submitted questions. We didn't manage to get through all of them. I'm very sorry. You'll have to come along to the next Q&A. And remember that this has been brought to you by Write Online. Go to writeonline.co.nz and have a look. If you like the content today, some of the things that Daniel and Simon have been saying, you're very likely to enjoy some of the content that we have on Write Online, and you can watch it whenever you like. So go to writeonline.co.nz and see if you like it. Have a free trial. Okay, Daniel, your last word, a pearl of wisdom, even if you're restating something, or a bit of encouragement.
Ask more questions earlier, even if it's annoying. That's how I know everything.
Right. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Daniel. And Simon, the last word is yours.
I think my key tip would be really try and think through your decision makers' likely questions. So, test it with colleagues, see if you can test it with somebody who works for or with that decision maker.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, folks. All the best with writing to leadership. I hope that advice has been helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next live Write Online Q&A. Ka kite anō.